Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson. We're continuing our study of um, of the resurrection of Jesus, and we're concluding it today as we go back to the first chapter of the Book of Revelation and get a glimpse of the glorified resurrection body of Jesus. We were together last time introducing this section. We reminded ourselves that we've seen the resurrection body of Jesus before his ascension in the Gospels, in the four Gospels. We get great detail, but in detail and agreement in all four Gospels. He had a corporeal body. He was able to eat. He was able to show his wounds, but it was not a body that was bound by the three dimensions that our earthly bodies are. That makes sense based upon what we've learned in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Um, but what we see in Revelation 1 is this resurrection body, but glorified by God, as Paul describes in Philippians 2. And that moment may be the very moment that's talked about in Revelation chapter 5, when the lamb that was slain returns triumphant, and the song that they sing in heaven changes because of the victory that the lamb has achieved. That might be the very moment that Paul is talking about, where God exalts him highly and gives him a name above every name. But the body that we're going to meet here is not the body that John saw on the beach on the Sea of Galilee in John chapter 21. This is stunning. This is going to leave him dead until Jesus raises him up again. And so let's read that. We're in Revelation chapter 1. He mentions that he's on the prison island of Patmos, and that he's heard a voice that sounded like a trumpet that told him to write to 7 churches in Asia. And in verse 12, he turns to look. I turned to see the voice that was speaking with me. And having turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands. And in the middle of the lampstands, one like a son of man, clothed in a robe reaching to the feet, and girded across his chest with a golden girdle. And his head and his hair were like white wool, and his like snow. His eyes were like flame of fire. His feet were like burnished bronze when it has been caused to glow in a furnace, and his voice was like the sound of many waters. In his right hand he held 7 stars, and out of his mouth came a sharp two-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in its strength. And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as a dead man. And he laid his right hand upon me, saying, Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last, and the living one. And I was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. And I have the keys of death and Hades. Write the things which you have seen, and the things which are, and the things which shall take place after these things. I think that we have a lot of exact detail as best as human language can communicate that detail with a little bit of metaphor. Do I think that an actual sword was coming out of the mouth of Jesus? No, I don't. I don't think that. Was he holding 7 actual stars in his hands? No. I think those are metaphorical. The word of God is a double-edged sword. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 12. Hebrews was written before Revelation, and I'm sure that metaphor was used more than once. And I'm sure that John is in all likelihood familiar with what the writer of Hebrews wrote. I think that's so much of the book of Revelation because it's being written from prison to people who are about to receive terrible persecution. And since literally his letters were being read by censors before they were sent on, there's a lot of code. This is prison literature, and there's a lot of code in Revelation. We know that. But what he has described otherwise really fits with what we've seen before. Now he says he saw one like a son of man. Well, he knows who the Son of Man is. What does he mean? It sort of look like Jesus. That phrase comes from Daniel chapter 7. And it'd be good for you to go back to Daniel chapter 7 and just begin reading with verse 1, where Daniel has a vision of God, and he talks about the Ancient of Days and one like a Son of Man. It's a phrase that he pulls from Daniel. John is going to do this throughout Revelation. He's going to quote Daniel, particularly Isaiah and Zechariah, more than anything else. Lots of other Old Testament passages, but and apocalyptic, but those three sources especially. Daniel more than anyone. And he takes us in the first chapter right back to Daniel, the beginning of that apocalyptic section of Daniel, Daniel chapter 7, and that vision he has of God. And some of the same descriptions that are there are here. And it jives with what we've seen on the Mount of Transfiguration too. The hair is there's brightness. The hair is whiter than wool. Jesus is described on Mount Transfiguration. His clothes were whiter than any launderer could ever get clothes. I mean, whiter than is humanly possible. In other words, it's beyond our ability to even describe the brightness of the white. Um, and then there's the glowing of the feet, the eyes that are glowing and like fire. They're alive with energy and brightness. Um, and um, and he, and and he has a body he has a head, he has a chest, he has legs, he has feet, he has arms, he has hands. He has a body, a corporeal body with a physiology that or at least a structure that we recognize as being like our human bodies, but so far beyond it that it strains at human language to even try to describe. He's wearing clothes. That's something else too. He's got on a robe and he's got on something, a chest plate or a sash, something across the middle that he is wearing, and his voice is beyond it's beyond description. It's like his voice was like being next to Niagara Falls. That's what his voice was like, and yet he communicates with that voice. Um, John throughout the especially through chapter 5, and especially anytime he describes the throne of God, strains at language. Human language is not sufficient to share what he has seen, and he's often reduced to talking about shapes and colors and using descriptions that don't, sea of glass, which is fire. What does that mean? But that's as close as he can get in human language to what he actually saw. And that's already happening in describing the resurrection, the glorified resurrection body of Jesus. In a sense, it's something familiar. It's a body with a head and a chest and two arms and two hands and two legs and two feet. Then again, it's beyond anything we can imagine. And it was so awesome that John falls down dead until he feels the hand of Jesus on his back, and he's alive again. And before we close, and I know we're already at 8 minutes, I just wanted to notice how Jesus describes himself. I am the living one. He's identifying himself directly with Yahweh. That's what Yahweh means, the one who exists. That's how God introduced himself to Moses at the burning bush, exactly the same way Jesus introduces himself to John in Revelation 1. But then he says, I was dead and I'm alive forevermore. So we know we're talking about Jesus, the one who was crucified, the one who was raised on the third day. Okay, it's an amazing thing to think about. What we're going to do now is we're going to go back to the Gospels. We're going to look at Matthew, Mark, and Luke and what Jesus says about the moment of his second coming when we are raised, when everything changes for us. We're going to look at what Paul has to say in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and reach back into 1 Corinthians 15. And then we're going to take a session, maybe two, to look at 2 Peter chapter 3. So thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.